misgivings. And now it's time to talk about Gaza. The Gaza death toll has surpassed 20,000. We're going to do a short update on that. And then we're also going to talk about the CNN anchor that actually went into the West Bank. So that's actually very good that CNN is finally fucking catching on.
War between Israel and Hamas. The White House says negotiations are underway for another temporary ceasefire and the release of more hostages. As Gaza's health ministry, which is run by Hamas, is reporting that the death toll has surpassed 20,000. Our foreign correspondent, Britt Clinton, is in Israel for us. Good morning, Britt.
Good morning, Robin. Yeah, new airstrike.
This is from Elant News. This is, sends us a Ynet International Affairs journalist. Nadav Eyal says, what I'm hearing from senior Israeli officials about the war. 1, this phase of war, phase 2, which includes taking operational control of Gaza towns and neighborhoods, yet not achieving full control enemy clearance, will end soon. They are hopeful about specific achievements in Khan Yunis, where Hamas leaders are suspected to be hiding. However, there are no guarantees. They plan to target areas down south. Israel is seeing increased Hamas attacks in areas it has already taken. Phase 3 is expected to begin mid to late January. The IDF will relocate in the north and center of Gaza, withdrawing from some areas. As I reported last week, Israel will not allow the en masse return of the Palestinian population. The argument is that there are areas that are still battlegrounds, and therefore the return of civilians is unsafe. The outlook is long-term, at least a year. Holy fuck. Many draw parallels to the IDF operations against Palestinian terror groups in the West Bank during the Second Intifada, which took about 2 years. Number 3, during phase 3, the IDF will continue aerial assaults and ground raids aimed at killing Hamas leaders and crippling its infrastructure and command. Israel is also preparing a plan to undermine Hamas's control of funding and taxation across Gaza. Number 4, Israel will be open to limited pauses in fighting, even extended ones, to facilitate more hostage deals. It is willing to release substantial numbers of Palestinian prisoners to ensure safe passage of Sinwar and Hamas leadership to leave Gaza if they free the hostages and cease fighting. What? They're going to let Yahya Sinwar and Hamas leadership get away and escape Gaza? That sounds so stupid. Unless your goal isn't to eradicate Hamas at all, and it's simply to have Hamas always dangle as a threat so that you can constantly and consistently act like, anne yemeğim geldi mi? Ay yok, senin yemeğin geldi. Benim yemeğim de birazdan gelecek. Sana aldım içli köfte. Yeah, just consistently dangle Hamas as the real threat that Israel has to deal with militarily, which allows them to, do whatever the fuck they want to the Palestinian population. I think the idea is for the Mossad to kill them later, potentially. But Mossad could kill Hamas leadership internationally right now. It's not like Israel has been restrained in its assassination plans, right? Israel has been very open about its willingness and ability to assassinate foreign nationals on foreign soil. They could technically go and kill all the Hamas people in Qatar right now. They know where it is. I think Ismail Haniyeh is in Cairo now, not even in Qatar, right? So why haven't they done that? It almost always feels like having Hamas is much better for Israel than not actually having Hamas to point to. So they can justify the ethnic cleansing. They need a guy. Yeah, Israel is very open about, murdering motherfuckers that they think are dangerous. Like, you could be an Iranian nuclear scientist and they'll fucking cook you. So, anyway, the general mindset within the defense apparatus is to prevent further worsening of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Oh, thank God, man. Oh, no. Who made it happen? Like, it's like a natural phenomena, right? It may be Operation Wrath of Grapes, Munich-style response, which may last years. Fearing it will limit Israel's legitimacy in targeting Hamas, this mindset is constantly and internally challenged by those who argue that Hamas will never be crushed as long as it's not held responsible by Gazan civilians for their disaster. The main issue for Netanyahu and the right wing is whether ending phase 2 and the intensive ground assault will be perceived as being weak on Hamas. Additionally, Netanyahu has yet to provide a clear vision for Gaza and how the war will be won. He is now committed to campaign efforts in an attempt to rescue some of his tarnished image. This is creating increased rifts in the emergency coalition. All eyes are on the north. Tens of thousands of Israelis are internally displaced due to the war Hezbollah initiated immediately after Hamas attack. The general assessment in Israel is that diplomatic attempts vis-a-vis Hezbollah will fail, and the chances of war are increasing. It's crazy. Gazan civilians aren't going to blame Hamas or their family members dying. They're blaming Israel. Yeah, of course they're blaming Israel. Like, the notion that like a foreign invader, in this circumstance, the belligerent occupier that's not so foreign, I guess, at this stage, but like the belligerent occupier is going to be welcomed as a liberator is a fucking idiotic one that has never been the case. Whether it be Afghanistan, whether it be Iraq, no matter where you are in the fucking world, sure, you can find some people who will align with the belligerent occupier, opportunists, careerists, those who want to establish a puppet state at the behest of like the American government in Iraq, for example, or even some Kurdish people in Iraq that were getting wiped out by the Saddam administration, right? But ultimately, the overwhelming majority of people are obviously not going to be too fond of the random fucking belligerents, the random belligerent occupiers that came in and are destroying their fucking lives and livelihoods and killing their family members. So yeah, I can't even think of a single fucking instance. Maybe I'm wrong, and I'm welcome. I welcome someone correcting me on this. I might be totally off base on this, but I do not know of a single fucking instance where the bombing campaigns have contributed to the population at the time feeling fondly towards the bombers, okay? And has like successfully turned around and has caused a liberation. A revolution. Did you see the tanks blowing up the kibbutzim? Not to say a huge amount of deaths, but still shows they did that. Yes. No, like people say Japan, but the allegiances within Japan came only after the restoration. The allegiances did not lead to a revolution in Japan at all, as a matter of fact. The bombing did not, the firebombing and the nukes did not lead to Japan going, "We love you, America." Okay? It actually only contributed to the hatred and hardening of positions. It's what came after that actually developed a relationship with the United States of America. Vietnam is another great example of this too. Maybe Allied bombings in Vichy, France, but that was occupied territory, so I suppose it doesn't really qualify. Yeah. And especially in like contemporary, in modern history, in the last, I guess, 30, 40 years, I cannot think of a single instance where the United States of America or any like Western country or fuck it, any country really has like bombed has become a belligerent occupier and led to people that are there feeling like they're truly liberated. I would say Russia is a great example of this as well. Like Russia in Eastern Ukrainian positions is a perfect representation of this holding true, not necessarily just for countries like America, but quite literally for countries in the East as well, right? So that's what I think. I think it just doesn't work, and I think it's simply. I think it is simply just pure, unadulterated, unfettered copium that the occupiers' media repeats for its own consent manufacturing purposes.
Strikes in Gaza sending the death toll higher. The WHO now saying that a child is killed every 10 minutes. This morning.
Were the Polish favorable towards the Nazi invasion? No. The Polish weren't even fucking favorable towards the USSR either. That's my point.
Oh my God.
Civilians and journalists caught in an Israeli airstrike. And as the war nears its 12th week, a grim milestone in Gaza, 20,000 killed, according to the Hamas-run health ministry.
We are just collateral damage.
Arwa Naif is a mother of two, forced to evacuate 5 times already since the start of the war.
There is no one single place where you can say, here it's a secure place where I can sleep the night. It is worse every day. It's getting worse every day.
But the war unlikely to end soon. In Beirut, a senior Hamas leader saying there's no hostage deal without a ceasefire. One of those released hostages returning to his home on Kibbutz Be'eri Wednesday, recalling his nightmare.
The last thing I remember is being carried away and Yuval, my girlfriend, say I love you.
House by house charred out, painful reminders of the horrors committed that day as pressure intensifies on the government to bring the rest of the hostages home. The White House says serious negotiations are underway, but Hamas telling us that the latest round of talks in Egypt ended without results. Michael.
All right, Britt, thank you, and please be safe.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more...
All right.
We stop at a service station in the occupied...
This is, this is in line with the Clarissa Ward coverage, right? Clarissa Ward was able to sneak into the Gaza Strip, and now CNN is not sneaking into, but actually offering coverage from the West Bank. Now, I have, for a long time now, I've talked about the Gaza Strip and how that death and devastation does not translate to empathy for Americans in the same way that the West Bank will, because we have no way to contextualize that level of ethnic cleansing and that level of violence. But because the operations in the West Bank are the regular maintenance of an apartheid regime, I think that it has the capacity for the Western world, like for people in the Western world, when they find out about what's going on in the West Bank, I think that they have an easier time identifying with it. Because the only time we see entire city blocks reduced to rubble is when it's happening far away in some fucking brown nation, and it's either happening as a consequence of like other brown people doing it to the brown people, or it's a consequence of us doing it to the brown people. So we have no way of like looking at that and being able to like develop sympathy for those victims, because we have been we're so used to seeing that in a manner that is depersonalized, in a manner that is like in a manner that is impossible to contextualize, impossible to understand. Did you forget Ukraine getting bombed? No, Ukraine is another example of this as well. Ukraine is the only time when you did see white people being victim to such a thing. And even then, it's like entire city blocks wiped out happens there. It doesn't happen to us. That's my point. So like, we don't really see it. We don't have a way of consistently feeling like this is an ongoing atrocity that we have to do something about, in the way that we can see the personalized violence of the daily maintenance of the apartheid regime, right? And during the Ukraine bombings, everyone, yes, like Ozora is saying here, during the Ukraine bombings, everyone reiterated the uncivilized Eastern Europe sentiments, but even so, they also mentioned how unique this was, because it was white people who were victim to this kind of thing. So they kept saying, oh my God, this doesn't happen. This is not supposed to happen in Europe. This is not supposed to happen here. This is Europe. But the point is, it's just like Americans and people in the Western world can't comprehend entire city blocks being wiped out, but they can understand an apartheid regime. Okay?
Palestinian West Bank. A man in military fatigues demands to check our IDs.
I have the right to secure this area.
What you're saying is kind of accurate to a testimony of an IDF vet. I remember he said he was more traumatized by a specific house raid in West Bank than actually being in Gaza in 2014. Well, for the IDF, I've seen conflicting reports on that. I've actually seen a lot of breaking the silence vets report that like going into Gaza actually made them realize like, oh fuck, what we're doing here is unacceptable. Obviously, like air missions is a little different, but when you actually do boots on the ground warfare, when you actually put the military inside of Gaza, that genuinely changes people's minds. But you are correct. A lot of veterans report like their operations in the West Bank breaking their brains and causing them to really reconsider the apartheid, because at that point you're literally doing this towards like a population that is just straight up a civilian population. Not to say that Gaza isn't a civilian population, but everyone is primed to say Gaza is Hamas, Gaza are terrorists, the children are terror babies, right? Like there is this constant recycling of the racial agitated propaganda that plays a significant role in people dehumanizing their victims, both the IDF itself, but also just like people watching from afar. But yeah, this corresponds to testimonies that I've read that the conflicts in Gaza are far more traumatic for soldiers on the ground due to their sheer violence, for sure. But I think it's like the daily maintenance of the apartheid against like a civilian population that's just trying to live, not even resisting against you, in the same way that like at least Gaza has some structure of like a standing military, some semblance of a standing military that has an interest and is willing to and is successfully at times defending from belligerent occupiers.
I need to check who you are and what you're doing here.
He has no identifying insignia, won't tell us who he is, but he's got a gun, so we oblige.
Like
We're
this
confused.
is so American, which is ironic because there's a fuck ton of American scumbags that are settling in the West Bank anyway. But why is this so American? It's because this guy might not fucking be an actual military member. He might just simply be a militia that is now ordained by Itamar Ben-Gvir and the like to conduct what he believes is a military operation, in many instances without any sort of real training whatsoever, right? It's just a dude with a gun wearing military fatigues at a fucking gas station. And if you and Americans can understand that, is what I'm trying to say. Americans that cannot comprehend, Americans that cannot associate in their minds with like being victim to a brutal assault by a belligerent occupier can totally understand and totally fucking totally feel the fear of a dude dressed up in military fatigues with a fucking assault rifle on his chest. That's something that you can totally get, right? We got our own fucking Gravy SEALs brigades out here doing similar shit.
The only ones. CNN obtained this video from inside Hebron, a divided city, filmed a few days after the Hamas October 7 attack.
He goes, "You're not a soldier."
The Palestinian man won't comply. He says he recognizes the man with the gun as a settler, not a soldier. In this tense climate, if a soldier issues an order, you comply. But is everyone with a gun and fatigues a soldier? The West Bank is under Israeli military occupation. It's also believed to be home to almost 750,000 settlers.
Very important for CNN audiences to see this reality, for the record. Yeah, these guys are basically the Klan. I mean, not even basically. They are the Klan. Like, it seems weird because when you think about it, like, when you see the Star of David painted outside of a home in the United States of America, that often spells trouble. That probably means, like, you know, you're going to do a hate crime, an anti-Semitic hate crime. When you see a Star of David painted outside of a house, graffitied outside of a house in the West Bank, it's actually the settlers that are actually targeting that house, that they are going to do a hate crime to the Palestinians living there. It has the exact opposite indication. They mark it so they can blow up the fucking house, so they can throw Molotov cocktails and, like, light the house on fire and try to get the people out of that house so they can inevitably settle in it. So that's what's really, that dynamic, I think, is important for people to recognize, because, like, if you grow up in America, you're thinking, like, you understandably recognize and you're trained to see anti-Semitism, especially if you're in progressive circles, right? And Jews are a marginalized group of individuals. Anti-Semitism is a very real bigotry, right? So it's the entire opposite way in Israel, because the Israeli citizens, Israeli Jewish citizens specifically, those who live in the West Bank, are the occupying power. They're the occupying power. They are deliberately the majority in many places. And they are engaging in an act of settler terrorism, settler violence. Right? So comprehending or looking at what happens in Israel with a Western lens oftentimes causes people to not really understand what the fuck's going on. Right? Always carry that example that I just gave you with you whenever you think about that. The Star of David being painted outside of a house in the United States of America oftentimes implies that an anti-Semitic hate crime is about to happen. A Star of David painted outside of a house in the West Bank is the exact opposite. It means that a Jewish supremacist militia is going to come and try to forcibly take a Palestinian family out of their homes. The exact other way around.
Israeli civilians living in the occupied territories. Settlers consider this part of their biblical homeland and are expanding into Palestinian territories, even though the UN Security Council considers their presence illegal. Yet settlers are integral to Israel's security plan in the occupied territories, as Israel Defense Force reservists and settlement security squads.
Yeah, these are the people that are getting armed by Itamar Ben-Gvir. These are the people that are getting the fatigues and the helmets and the fucking armor by Itamar Ben-Gvir at a time when the Israeli reservists have reported having less, not having enough of the gear that they need when they're going into fucking Gaza. So just understand, like, the genuine intention, like the interest that the Israeli government has. And how they manage their own fucking limited resources.
Says the security threats
in
settlements, towns, and villages. Palestinians told CNN they consider armed settlers a greater threat than ever before. Their remit from the IDF is blurring the lines as settlers encroach on Palestinian land. Like here, in the Palestinian village of Tuwani, where there's a settlement at the top of the hill. In this video, you see men in military fatigues. The IDF equips both civilian settler security squads and soldiers in the region. As you can see here, it's almost impossible to differentiate. They point their rifles at residents and then they shoot, according to eyewitnesses. CNN shared the images we gathered in the West Bank with a senior IDF official who was unable to tell us who here is in the IDF and who is not. We asked how then are Palestinians expected to differentiate. The official told CNN there have been cases of reservists who did not act in accordance with army standards, adding there is no place in the IDF for such
I mean, there's
behavior.
obviously the famous case of the settler that shot the other fucking dude, the former cop, too. I don't know if they'll mention this. I gotta pee. Fuck.
Case that breaches army standards will be investigated. Palestinians, the official said, should contact their local brigade. But Palestinian rights activist and local resident Basil Adra says settlers in military fatigues are forcing Palestinians off their land.
These settlers and with their guns, and they're pointing it to the head of the residents, and they tell them, if you don't leave in 24 hours, we will shot you. So the family would understand that they're not playing. It's a serious threat of killing if you don't leave your home. That led for like 35 families to leave. And these settlers have been wearing uniform also.
Settlers have heavyweight support in Israel's far-right government. Itamar Ben-Gvir, Minister for National Security, settler. After the Hamas October 7 attack, Ben-Gvir loosened gun permit regulations, making it easier for tens of thousands of Israeli civilians to bear arms. Bezalel Smotrich, Minister of Finance, settler. Also post-attack, pushed through over $100 million for West Bank security, including funds for training and equipping settler security squads. But it's not just arming and equipping. We witnessed firsthand some of the restrictions the IDF imposed on Palestinians. Ihtidal's house is not even 5 minutes away from the other side of this checkpoint, but she can't get through.
Every day they tell her to go back, and every day she has to do this extraordinarily long loop to try and get in. She stood there.
So here's the interesting phenomena. In a lot of instances, okay, a lot of these kids that are getting these fucking guns, a lot of these a lot of the settlers that are getting these guns are not even fucking trained. When they had to do mandatory military service in the IDF, they got a religious exemption. Okay? Now, without the military training, they get the fucking guns specifically so they can level up on their harassment and ethnic cleansing operation. Think about that.
They are intentionally making it difficult for us, making so we have to cross through areas that are hostile to us to get to our homes.
Ihtidal picks up a few more things before she sets off home, but not too many. It's a long walk uphill. Since the 1990s, the city of Hebron has seen many curfews. The day we visited, there was a curfew in place from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Ihtidal has to go through this checkpoint. Palestinians have to be searched. Settlers aren't normally checked. Ihtidal has to walk. Settlers can drive. Palestinians need permission for visitors. Settlers don't. The IDF says all these measures are in accordance with their security assessments to provide security for all residents. Settlers and Palestinians live side by side, but the rules for each are very different. Faiza and her husband have lived in this house for 14 years. They inherited it from her husband's grandparents. Their house is overlooked by an IDF sentry post, yet they fear for their safety.
This scene is so inappropriate and depressing for our home. You can see up here what we've had to put in place to protect ourselves from the settlers.
As we leave Faiza's house, we get stopped by an Israeli soldier. He says we're not allowed to walk along the main road. We have to go back to the checkpoint to be searched again because we've been inside a Palestinian home.
I would just point out a lack of logic, which is that these Palestinian houses, the Palestinians have come through that checkpoint, so they can't have possibly brought in anything.
Sorry, just so I can understand, just so I can understand, so I'm really confused, as usual.
So, even though we went through that checkpoint,
Yeah.
because we have been in the house of Palestinians, we now have to go jumping over people's garden walls.
So we can't walk on the street?
We can't go straight down.
Come back.
If you were going through the checkpoint and you stay here, it's great. But if as soon as you move from different areas,
Yes.
so you need to get
Now
rechecked.
do you understand it?
Oh.
Yes. So we need to get rechecked. So we're going to the route.
Okay, enough for next time.
Come on. Let's just go. Thank you. We'll see you in a bit.
See you soon.
But we can't get down. The access to the garden is closed.
Damn, he's so nice, bro. That's a common regional accent. Yeah. For those of you who don't know, that Israeli occupying force soldier is demonstrating the common regional dialect and accent of Bondi. Yeah. Which is, of course, I mean, he's showing once again, he's just like, obviously, thousands of years this dude has lived in this historic land, clearly. And certainly not doing fucking apartheid.
So the path I can see is the other side of that
Motherfucker was like, Adelaide! Good day, mate! How you doing? Right. How you fucking doing, right? I'm doing a fucking apartheid state, mate. What do you mean? Yeah, I'm a sick cunt.
But if you can see one, I can't.
We can't walk on the street because we've been in a Palestinian house, and now we're deemed a security risk. So we're stuck. Eventually, the soldier has to call into his superior.
It's just so sad, because, like, under every other circumstance, you would celebrate a thing like this. You would celebrate that, like, any other fucking country, any other circumstance, if you see a dude with a fucking Australian accent speaking to you in English and is like, yeah, I'm Turkish, mate. Right. My family. There's a lot of Turkish people that went to Australia as well. Yeah. I saw the Anzac War. And then I thought, nice fucking beaches, mate. That's what my parents said. You would look at that situation, you go, oh, that's sick. This is the one instance where it's a threatening presence because, you know, he's there, he has a gun, and his job is to tell you to literally fucking go and fuck off and go back to the goddamn checkpoint and then come back and jump through like backyards and shit. It's just like unimaginable, man.
To give us special permission to walk on the main road.
Thank you so much.
We head out and back through the checkpoint where we're searched again. A tiny glimpse into what Palestinians navigate every day. The UN says that post-October 7th, over 1,000 Palestinians in the West Bank have been displaced.
By the way, I've seen so much coverage on this shit. This is the first time I've seen a dude unironically be kind to a Western journalist. I know that they're like, they obviously dial it back in the presence of cameras, but never actually like openly kind. I guess that's the difference with CNN.
Forced from home by security restrictions and settler violence. The US and UK are now sanctioning extreme settlers, but Palestinians say it's not enough. Not when settlers can cloak themselves in the authority of the Israeli state. Ne'em al-Bagir, CNN, Hebron.
Jadu.
He was polite, not kind. True. But usually you don't see that. Not even to Americans. I mean, we saw the other day, they beat the shit out of a fucking, they beat the shit out of an Anadolu Agence journalist in the West Bank. All right, this is going to be the last Gaza update that we're going to be doing today before we move on to the American prisoner swap, the Supreme Court decision, and more.
وين الموضوع؟ طب اسمع قولها أنا شاطر.
I didn't want to leave my home. We were comfortable. We had power, food, and water.
This is what it's like in Gaza to move around.
All my BBC colleagues had already fled south. They told me how bad the situation was. No electricity, no water. I didn't want to go. I wanted to delay the suffering my family would have to face for as long as possible. But the houses opposite our home were being bombed one after another. I knew our turn would come next. I had already lost one son. I couldn't risk losing another.
What did my son do to die like this? What was his mistake?
In the rush to go, we didn't even close our front door. Then we started our journey through hell. There were Israeli soldiers stationed in demolished buildings along the road. We didn't want to use our phones to film as we were worried about being targeted. We walked for hours and knew eventually we'd have to cross the Israeli army's checkpoint. We were nervous. My children kept asking, what will the soldiers do to us? We came to a stop about a kilometer from the checkpoint itself, joining a long queue of people that stretched across the entire width of the road. We spent more than 4 hours waiting, sometimes only taking one step forward in half an hour. People were crying and there was no room to sit down. My father fainted and we had to hold him up. When we entered the checkpoint, it felt like Judgment Day. I saw about 50 people in total get detained, all men. They were asked to strip to their underwear and sit on the ground.
They do facial scanning. The fuck is happening here? Hold on. Gotta fix my camera. Oh, there it is. So they do facial scanning. You guys have probably seen it. And it's like if you are a suspected affiliate of a terror organization, like you don't have to be like actually Hamas at all. If you're a man, if you're male, it's a wrap. The same thing happens in the West Bank too.
A few meters beyond the checkpoint, I saw 4 detainees in their underwear being blindfolded. Beside the demolished building, there was a wall of sand. The blindfolded men were taken to the sand hill by soldiers and then took steps down out of my vision. Then we heard gunfire. I'm not sure whether they were shot or not. Further along the road, I saw corpses and rotting body parts. I saw about 10 bodies on the ground. They were covered in flies and being eaten by birds, giving off one of the foulest smells I have ever experienced. I screamed at the top of my lungs, telling my children not to look. I told them to look at the sky and continue walking. Then an Israeli tank appeared. It was moving towards us at speed. In our fright to get away, we had to trample over those bodies.
You have to remember, by the way, this is an occupying force that has demonstrated that it does not care about civilians. It is demonstrated that it's willing and able to kill civilians on a regular basis. So for those children, that's a entirely, like, when we look at this, in your mind, you're thinking, oh, well, they're civilians, they should be fine. They're civilians, they should be fine. Like, no, from their perspective, this is the occupying force. Like, they fucking killed their own hostages even. From their minds, they're like, they could just shoot at them and kill them at any moment. Any moment. Thank you, Anne. Bana bir tane içli köfte getirir misin? Bir tane. İçli köfte bir tane. Hepsini mi yedin? Wow, okay. No, it's all good.
The weather was freezing. It was the coldest night I've ever experienced in my life. I had to take off my shirt to cover my youngest boy, Jad. The next morning, we set off early for Khan Yunis, taking a donkey cart ride for some of the journey. At Deir al-Balah, we got on a bus with a capacity for 20. There wasn't enough room for us, so some of us clung to the doors and windows.
الله يسلمك. كيف حالك؟ الله يخليك جامد زمنك. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله. والله الحمد لله. بعين الله بعين الله. بعين الله يا كبير. كنا كلناه في المعركة. ايش بدنا نعمل؟ بعين الله. خلينا بخير. الحمد لله.
I knew that the ground operation would move towards Khan Yunis. I knew there'd be nowhere safe. In Rafah, we are renting a small outhouse. The roof is made of tin and plastic bags. If shrapnel falls, there is nothing to protect us. We have to wait in a 3-hour queue for drinking water. So this is what we do now. We have hardly anything to eat and nowhere to go. All I want to do now is leave Gaza and be safe with my children.
It's just a daily life, dude. Something to consider when you think about what the United States of America recently did, where they, one, voted to block a UN Security Council decision to offer Palestinians the right to self-determination, while also simultaneously blocking all efforts of a ceasefire. There's really not a lot of, I don't know, there's a lot of atrocities around the world, man, but this is just so direct, so in your fucking face, so obviously being done with our taxes. And then also there's this. Israel will fully fund college degrees for all fighters in the Gaza war. Like, obviously, we're not directly funding that, but we are funding the war. Were they not doing that before? I think so. Yeah, no, they don't mean Hamas fighters, chat. Anyway.